as it was to our Saxon and Norman ancestors. If they made their bows of it, we make our gun stocks of it, he says. In this town, he says, the price of wood rises almost steadily, and the only question is how much higher it is to be this year than it was the last. And of course, those of us who spend any time on the mountain gathering wood so we can burn it in our fireplace because we live in a place where we need to be warmed through long winters, obviously will smile at a line like that, right? Because you're right, he's right, it does continue to increase in price. And then he talks about the woodpile. And again, everything is metaphoric. Every man looks at his woodpile with a kind of affection. I love to have mine before my window, and the more chips, the better, to remind me of my pleasing work. He says, I had an old axe, which nobody claimed, which by spells and winter days on the sunny side of the house, I played about the stumps which I had got out of my bean field. He then will talk about, at the very end, the fire in the fireplace. He says, I sometimes left a good fire when I went to take a walk in a winter afternoon. When I returned 3 or 4 hours afterward, it would still be alive and glowing. My house was not empty, though I was gone. I think it's a compelling line. My house was not empty, though I was gone. It was as if I had left a cheerful housekeeper behind. It was I and fire that lived there, and commonly my housekeeper proved trustworthy. One day, however, as I was splitting wood, I thought that I would just look in at the window to see if the house was not on fire. It was the only time I remember to have been particularly anxious on this score. So I looked and saw that a spark had caught my bed, and I went in and extinguished it when it had burned a place as big as my hand. But my house, occupied so sunny and sheltered a position, and its roof was so low that I could afford to let the fire go out in the middle of almost any winter day. He finishes by talking about moles. He says the animal merely makes a bed, which he warms with his body in a sheltered place. But man, having discovered fire, boxes up some air in a spacious apartment and warms that. Instead of robbing himself, makes that his bed in which he can move about, divested of more cumbrous clothing, maintain a kind of summer in the midst of winter, and by means of windows even admit the light, and with a lamp lengthen out the day. Thus, he goes a step or two beyond instinct and saves a little time for the fine arts. And then to finish, he says it this way. The next winter, I used a small cooking stove for economy, since I did not own the forest, and we think immediately use the word economy at the first chapter of Walden. But it did not keep fire so well as the open fireplace. Cooking was then, for the most part, no longer a poetic, but merely a chemic process. And again, you gotta love it that Thoreau's always moving between those two, of the chemic versus the poetic process. He says, it will soon be forgotten in these days of stoves that we used to roast potatoes in the ashes after the Indian fashion. The stove not only took up room and scented the house, but it concealed the fire, and I felt as if I had lost a companion. You can always see a face in the fire. And for those of us who love to just look into fire, we know here what he's saying. You can always see a face in the fire. The laborer, looking into it at evening, purifies his thoughts of the dross and earthiness which they have accumulated during the day. But I could no longer sit and look into the fire, and the pertinent words of a poet recurred to me with new force. And then he finishes with a little poem. For our life's, just a line or two from it. For our life's common light, who are so dull? Did thy bright gleam mysterious converse hold with our congenial souls, secrets too bold? Well, as we get ready now for chapter 14, former inhabitants and winter visitors, we move from summer into fall, and then, of course, into winter. I hope that this reading continues to challenge you. Thank you.